Open the podcast bay door as hell.
Hello everyone and welcome to episode 81 of Welcome to Geektown. We're continuing the hour-plus long episodes, and since this is episode 7 in the series of my deep dive into WandaVision with friend and listener Joel L., we'll skip the usual introductions and get right into the beginning of our conversation. A quick warning, we're looking at this episode using all of the knowledge gained throughout, so we discuss aspects of the ending even near the very beginning. So be sure you've watched this episode of the show before listening to this episode of the podcast. Alright, let's get into it. Welcome back once again. We are discussing episode 7 of WandaVision. And this one is titled Breaking the Fourth Wall, which is incredibly fitting.
Although not the first time that that's happened in this show.
No, it definitely happened in the last episode, and we've had a couple of moments where people have glanced at the camera, but Billy and Tommy talking directly.
Not quite like this one.
Yeah, this is a different level. For those of you who are unfamiliar with the concept of breaking the fourth wall, or want to know about some examples of it happening in comic books, be sure to check out episode 8 of Welcome to Geektown.
Which was one of my favorites. I love when comics do that.
Oh, me too. I love meta humor, and so obviously this show has been right up my alley, and Breaking the Fourth Wall is one of the prime examples of that meta humor, where you acknowledge the audience and acknowledge what is going on.
Speaking of, hi audience!
Hello! And the sitcoms that we're homaging this time are ones that have done that same practice, with Modern Family and The Office and Parks and Rec and all those sorts of mockumentary shows that have interview segments breaking up the main storyline.
Right, of which I have seen maybe 2 episodes among all of those.
Yeah, I have not seen a lot of them either. I've heard good things about them. I've watched a little bit of the early Office. The unfortunate thing is that some of that Office also has cringe humor, which really tends to turn me off, and so it wasn't something that I sought out because of that. And I have such a limited amount of time to watch things anyway that I have to be kind of discerning and choose what I'm going to stick and watch every single episode of.
Yeah, and I heard, actually on all 3 of those shows, what I heard was, it takes some getting into, and once you're into it, it's amazing!
Right.
But who has the time?
Yeah, exactly. So, let's get into what happens in the show itself.
Absolutely, and fair warning, I am likely to use some meta-knowledge here. This show has consistently been when you watch it again, things are gonna be way different. And this particular episode, I watched it a second time this morning, and I could not watch it with fresh eyes.
Right, because so much of what we find out at the end influences what happened before that. But we get started with Wanda in her interview segment. I loved the juxtaposition of her just kind of nonchalantly recapping what had happened last episode, with the screams and frantic action of the soldiers as the border expanded out into them.
It was a great way to set the tone for the episode, which was, this is going to be a funny episode. And if this show has trained me on anything, it's that if the vast majority of the beginning of the episode is going to be a funny, then the very end is going to be a uh-oh.
Yep. And they follow that pattern here.
Uh-huh.
And we haven't noticed them in the last couple episodes, but the bedspread, when we cut to Wanda covering herself trying to avoid the kids, the bedspread is covered in hexes.
Oh, you're kidding. It keeps coming back.
It does. Like I said, I didn't notice them in, I think, the last 2 episodes. I haven't been really watching out for them in particular, but they...
Have we seen the bed since that scene in episode 2?
I don't think so. But, I mean, just hexes in general.
True.
We definitely haven't commented on them in the last couple of episodes.
Other than Darcy calling it the hex.
Right, but seeing actual hexes have not been a recurring theme in the sitcom portions of the episodes.
True.
For the last couple of episodes. But
very, very
there
true.
they were. And then the kids come in, and their game is freaking out, and so they...
I loved it.
Oh
God, that was so great.
And I have played every single one of those games. Yep. It starts with the Nintendo Switch, and then goes back to the N64, and then flips to the Atari, and then Uno cards, because...
Right.
Turns out, you can only go so far back with video games.
Yep.
But then Billy is apparently a very strong telepath. He has inherited his mother's abilities quite a bit, because his head is noisy.
Yeah, and we mentioned in one of our previous episodes that in the past, like when Wanda started out in the MCU, her powers required proximity. She needed to be close to someone and actively interacting with them.
Right.
This is not the case for Billy.
No. Well, my feeling is that he's hearing the people inside. He's hearing the real people who are screaming to try to get out.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why his head is noisy, and why later Agnes is quiet.
Yes.
And the kids are fighting.
Mm-hmm.
Wanda pretty much ignores them. Something that, again, I haven't completely avoided other people's thoughts and opinions. So one thing that I read, and going back and re-listening, re-watching, it is definitely noticeable, is when Wanda says previously on WandaVision, every episode she gets a little more depressed and a little more lethargic.
Oh.
So episode 2, she's like, previously on WandaVision. By this episode, it's more like, previously on WandaVision. So she is...
being broken down.
She is being broken down. She is losing basically the will to fight, it feels like. And so when the kids are fighting, she just basically ignores it and goes to the kitchen and makes herself the healthiest breakfast ever.
Oh, yes.
And we get our first breakdown moment that Wanda witnesses. The milk going from almond milk to whole milk to the glass bottle.
To the glass bottle in black and white eventually.
Yes. And so everything is going backwards, back to the beginning as it breaks down. And, oh man, her look to the camera of, yeah, I don't know what that's about. Must be a case of the Mondays. Am I right? All of the interview segments are hilarious.
Yes, absolutely.
Except when they're not.
Right.
And now we go into the opening credits, which is the first non-lyrical
Mm-hmm.
opening theme that we've gotten, which is fitting with the more recent times. TV shows have gotten away from theme songs that have lyrics in them, and it's more often an instrumental.
It's so sad.
Well, I think the shorter the theme song, the more show/commercials you can fit in.
More that second one, yes.
Well, yes, but... And then I think a lot of the theory is that modern audiences are more sophisticated and don't need the premise of the show reintroduced to them every episode.
That's true, and that's not always what the theme song did.
Not always,
We got
but
some great theme songs when we were kids.
we did.
It's a lost art now.
For the most part. There are still some out there, but it is much more the rule than the exception these days to have a quick, lyricless theme song.
Well, absolutely. I mean, if you look at, like, The Good Place, for example, their theme is literally 5 seconds.
Yes, they are much shorter than they used to be. And a quick Easter egg for those unaware, in the opening credits, the license plate on top did not have a state, it had a number.
Okay.
12/28/22. Stan Lee's birth date.
Awesome.
So we get our Stan Lee
Cameo-ish.
ish sort of thing there for those who have been looking out for it.
Well, I'm glad to see that, or hear that, rather. I did notice the ransom note in the credits. You know, that style of cutting one letter out from a magazine, and it said, "I know what you are doing, Wanda."
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's... Also, I loved Sorry We're Wanda.
Yes.
And this one had created by Wanda Maximoff on the closing title screen there.
Which is more common in the modern shows, you know, if this was
Yes.
created by, and that matters to modern audiences. But on that same screen was the first time we saw the word vision. Vision was kind of an afterthought in these credits.
That's true. It was WandaVision.
Right.
So, yeah, it's focused much more on Wanda, except that we found out that Hayward is focused on Vision.
Right.
And speaking of Hayward, we head into the new temporary sword base.
8 miles outside of town.
Yeah, giving themselves a little more leeway now.
And yet
Just in
the
case.
hex is still so clearly visible right there.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, no, it's nearby, but you can't walk to it
Right.
in a couple of minutes. And the soldier Hayward is talking to mentions that the signal has gone dead.
Yeah, that was one of the first... Oh, we're in the third act of this story.
Yes, but it makes me wonder, what are we watching?
Huh.
If there's no signal going out, what are the opening credits and the commercial for?
Or who are the opening credits and commercial for? Because as you've pointed out in the past, we don't know the intended audience.
Right.
I mean, it seems pretty clear that, again, using some meta-knowledge, it seems pretty clear to me at this point that S.W.O.R.D. was the intended audience for a lot of the beginning. They wanted to set up Wanda as the villain so that they're going to take whatever action they're going to take and potentially distract her from trying to mount a rescue mission. And if that's the case, cutting off the signal now, good strategy.
Because we now will find out more about who is actually behind things.
Right.
But they are still sticking to the format of a sitcom for this episode, so...
Who are we entertaining?
Yeah. And is that signal going somewhere else if it's not being broadcast out?
It's also possible that this episode is intended by those in charge of this universe as the finale because they are getting what they want, but they haven't yet.
That's true. It's also the most modern episode possible, I think. I can't imagine going farther forward than the time period we've gotten in this episode.
Right.
So, like you said, we're in the third act of the story. I'm guessing that we're going to lose the sitcom format for the last 2 episodes.
I very strongly suspect we're going to lose the sitcom format for the final episode. This penultimate one, they need a way to get us, the real world audience, to have a pause for a week. So they still need that please stand by with ending credits.
Okay.
So there's got to be a something that allows it to still be episodic.
Right.
But yeah, I think that the opening credits and commercial are very much intended for Wanda.
Okay.
And because I feel that way this episode, it makes me rethink all of the opening credits and commercials in the previous episodes.
Yeah, because we discussed it earlier in previous episodes of this show, and you had thought that it was more Wanda's subconscious influencing those commercials.
Right.
And I had suggested that it was talking to Wanda rather than Wanda talking about herself.
Right.
And now you're on the same page as me.
You were, yeah. There were so many things. I should have known better than to doubt you.
Well, now, I don't want to take full credit. I can definitely get things wrong as well. But whenever my theories are proved right, I do have to give myself just a little pat on the back.
And you had several this episode.
The last thing about the sword base before we get back into the sitcom world, he says we launch today.
Yes.
Launch what? How are they expecting to get through to launch anything?
It's really hard to say. I mean, we know that he has a way to see inside the Hex.
That's
Maybe
true.
whatever that is has given him insight into how to
get something physical through.
Right. And we hear later he's planning on burning the whole place to the ground to get to Vision.
Right.
That seems in line.
Yeah. So they've avoided big superhero fights for most of this show. I think we're gonna finally get some big action in the last couple of episodes.
I think you're right, and I think that when they tell us that this show cost X million dollars per episode, I think they might be averaging.
Well, they've never said, Disney has never come out and said it cost this much. Reports are, and it was a total budget for the show. It was, the show cost $225 million. So it wasn't, they didn't say per episode.
Okay.
We did an average per episode when we talked about that number before, but the reporting was not giving an average per episode. It was just giving the total for the entire show.
Well, I'm guessing we're ramping up to more.
Yeah, I think a lot of the FX budget is going to be coming out of these last couple of episodes.
Uh-huh.
Alright, but let's get back into the sitcom world, where Vision wakes up.
Oh, I loved this whole thing. I continue loving everything about this circus.
Yes, I am so glad the circus is still in town.
Yep.
And almost everyone in there is a clown still.
Yep.
Including Vision.
Yes.
Or at least that's what the strongman believes him to be. And he is set up to work with the escape artist, who is Darcy.
Who, unfortunately, we don't know her in-universe name. She only gives her name once she wakes up. Aww.
Yeah, but the little bit we get of escape artist Darcy was quite fun.
Yes.
She's very true to her original character, but having her not recognize Vision and refer to him as Creeper, and turning him down originally for a date, then saying, all right, I'll go with you, but I'm having the lobster.
Right.
All of that interaction is hilarious. And I love her shrugging off the chains as she walks away. The whole bit there is great.
But this scene was when I kind of cocked my head a little bit and said, wait, that's Strongman. And I double-checked. That Strongman was the agent who had locked Darcy to the truck.
He's the one who locked Darcy to the truck. He also appears in multiple other episodes. I believe he's the one who is standing next to Darcy when she picks up the oscilloscope and is asking for her analysis. And so I think it's kind of funny that we get this moment early in the show of her saying, no, I'll get this myself and pick up this big heavy thing. And now he's the strong man.
Yeah, so the interaction that Darcy has with him later in the episode is just this wonderful little comeuppance.
Yes, but we're not quite to that point yet.
Not yet.
We go back home, where, again, Wanda is fairly apathetic about everything until the kids bring up Uncle Pietro and what he said.
Do not believe anything that man said. He is not your uncle.
But who is he?
Yeah.
And she has no answers. Which, we all find out about our parents eventually. Usually you're a little older when you come to that realization,
and usually it's not presented in quite this stark a manner.
Yeah, no, that was rough for Billy and Tommy. They did not want to hear that. You can tell from the expressions on their faces that this is a little much for them to take.
Yeah.
But yeah, who is Pietro? If he's not the uncle, and I don't know if he's the alternate universe version, I don't know.
Very unclear.
Yeah, but I'm guessing we'll get some answers next episode.
Here's hoping.
And Wanda has gotten to the point of not caring about using her magical abilities at all.
Nope, open that door like this.
Yeah, she just opens the door. Not only does she open the door, but she says, "Hi, Agnes," without turning around. Mm-hmm. So she knows exactly who it is, which I assume is also magical, or part of her abilities.
Or just the expectation. I mean, Vision has pointed out in past episodes that when they need something, the door opens and Agnes comes in.
That's true. And there are many shows with a best friend who will just pop over at any given point, and so it's not unusual to expect them. But we also know that there's a delivery man in the neighborhood, so there are other people it could be, but Wanda is just, I know who it is, and I open the door, and so Agnes comes on in and takes the kids.
Yes. And Wanda is so relieved. She gives this smile, and I gotta say, from an external perspective, this is the first time in the MCU that I have looked at Wanda and gone, oh, she's an Olson. This was the very first time that I looked at her, and the resemblance to her sisters was so clear.
Oh, see, I've seen that resemblance from the very beginning. But this is really the first time that she is happy to see them go. She is at a point where she is just wants to be completely left alone. Doesn't even want her kids around. And after Agnes leaves with the kids, we get more reality breaking down, with everything switching back to past versions. Mm-hmm. And we get another moment of talking to the camera. And for the listeners, if anyone ever says, "I'm fine," more than twice in a row, They are not fine.
I have a sneaking suspicion you didn't need to specify that for your listeners.
I have some younger listeners. This is something that some people may need to learn.
All right.
But her whole "I'm fine" to the camera 6 times in a row.
In totally different ways each time. It was a great scene.
There is an acting exercise that I did when I was a theater major in college, and we even did some of it in theater class in high school, where you are given a line and you have to read it with completely different intentions every single time.
And sometimes someone will call out, okay, now do it like this.
Right, yeah. And she obviously has practice with that exercise, because every single "I'm fine" came out differently. I think it had still the same intention behind it.
Sure.
But it was a very different reading every time.
And different intensities. And who am I trying to convince? And realizing I'm trying to convince myself instead of them. And no.
I'm fine. I'm fine. I'm fine. Again, I'm going to say it's a shame that most genre shows do not get recognition for acting achievements, because Elizabeth Olsen is killing it in this show. She
really is.
But moving on from that, we now get to see Monica and Agent Wu, and we get our report on Project Cataract.
Yeah, Hayward wants his sentient weapon back, which, as happens so frequently in particularly comic book related media, words come out of the character's mouth that don't feel like they would necessarily come out of a human's mouth, but they really wanted us to put the connection with S.W.O.R.D. back in here.
Right. And did you pause on the email?
I did not.
It basically says exactly what Monica and Jimmy say, except for the last sentence, which proves you right.
Oh, really?
Yes.
This is a rarity. I'm curious.
The last sentence is, "This is a decoy communique he sent to Vision's office."
Huh.
So you're right. The email to Vision that got read aloud was from Hayward.
Very interesting. One has to wonder why.
Yeah. Maybe some sort of attempt to wake Vision up and get him out? He later says, "You really want out, don't you?"
Yeah.
Maybe he thinks if he can get Vision out, then he can get him back.
That's true. That was one of the bigger moments of Vision realizing things are wrong. That, the more you can get him to wake up, the more he's going to want to get out.
Exactly. So that's a possibility. And after they have that discussion, we get to meet up with the Air Force personnel who Monica had apparently called.
Is Major Goodner in existence elsewhere?
Not that I could find. There is no Major Goodner in Marvel Comics. There's no one that I could find with the last name of Goodner in Marvel Comics.
All right.
But she is part of the Air Force, which ties her back to Maria. Now, my question is S.W.O.R.D. made up of military people? Because she is definitely in the Air Force. She has Goodner has U.S. Air Force as a patch on her BDUs.
Right, but the vehicle that she has is very clearly a S.W.O.R.D. vehicle.
Exactly. So there has to be some sort of crossover. Unless, now the thing is that she said this is to your specifications. Although it seems very quick to have that thing built.
Right, it seems more likely to me that she sent, "I need something that can do this," and then Major Goodner went searching for a thing that could do that.
Right, and requisitioned it.
Right.
So the crossover between the Air Force and S.W.O.R.D. is probably something we will find out in Captain Marvel 2.
Sure.
When Monica and Carol get more interaction as adults.
Right. or it's possible that now that Sword exists in the MCU, as far as we are aware of it, that it will show up more and we'll find out more about where they fit into the landscape.
That's true. So now let's hit the circus again. And now's when Vision wakes up Darcy. And I love that he says, I have questions. She says, I have answers. And they take off in the truck.
And she has no answers.
Exactly. The first two questions, the two most important questions for Vision, are my kids safe? And who is this guy Pietro? And she's like, I don't know. But she does know the most important thing, which is that the love between Vision and Wanda is real.
Right.
But again, that comes up later.
Yeah, first we get that beautiful moment when Darcy hits the strongman with that
the sound effect.
Cartoony sound effect.
Well,
unless it was part of the background music as the intro to the music, because it flowed right into it.
It flowed right into it. It had to have been put there on purpose.
Of course.
But I think it was supposed to be diegetic. I think it was somebody hitting the test your strength game somewhere in the background and us hearing it. I saw your questioning look.
Yes, diegetic.
Diegetic means that it is sound that actually takes place within the story. So a diegetic song would be something playing on the jukebox.
Okay.
So it's something that the characters would be able to hear as well as the audience.
Okay, but
it was still done for comedic purposes, but I think it was supposed to be.
I didn't see anything.
I didn't see anything, but no,
it's the right locale,
it's the right atmosphere.
For that kind of thing.
Yeah, it's the right location for that kind of thing to happen.
Yeah.
So yeah, they take off, and we get another switch back to the home,
and things are glitchy
all over the place, and I love the stork showing back up.
I loved the wallpaper rolling itself up the walls.
Yeah, everything is trying to revert back to previous iterations. We even see the broken wall from when Monica got shoved through it.
Right.
And then we get another interview segment.
Oh man, this one.
This is the one that was not funny.
This is what broke everything for me. My brain just went quack in this interview segment.
We actually get the interviewer asking a question, which, as Wanda points out, is not how it's usually done in these shows. We never hear the interviewers asking them questions. They just answer questions that were asked off camera that are edited out. And the question she gets, do you think maybe this is what you deserve? And now, knowing the reveal at the end of the episode, the fact that it's Agatha asking her that question.
That's when it felt to me like it was less like Wanda is losing control and more like either she only had the illusion of control in the first place, or maybe someone is actively working against her.
Yeah. She is definitely being antagonized in that moment. And she does her best to brush it off and ignore it. Like I said, her response is, you're not supposed to talk. She doesn't acknowledge the actual question itself at all.
Yeah, to her it's not about the content, but about the context.
Right. So that was definitely the most disturbing of the interview moments. That was where it was no longer being played for laughs. And speaking of things not being played for laughs...
Yeah, then we go into the first commercial that was not, as far as I was aware, actively about something from Wanda's past.
No, it's possibly about something from Wanda's future.
Or even her present. Or, actually, the way you said that, tell me about Nexus.
So, in Marvel Comics, there is the Nexus of all realities.
That's not an ominous name or anything.
It is a portal that is usually found in the Florida swamps, in the Everglades.
Okay.
and is traditionally guarded by Man-Thing, a Marvel character, not quite superhero. He came out around the same time as Swamp Thing came out from DC.
Yeah, and if I remember correctly, they look very similar.
They have similar looks. There was also a character in some independent comics called the Heap that was reintroduced around the same time and given a similar look to these two as well with that reboot. And so it was just kind of in the zeitgeist of the 70s of a creature made entirely of plant life rather than animal life that has some sort of mystical connection to the world. And so the Nexus of All Realities is exactly what it sounds like. It is a doorway that can lead to other realities.
That does sound like something that will come up in the next Doctor Strange movie.
It does seem that way, doesn't it? Which means there's a pretty good chance, I would think, that we're going to get to see Man-Thing in the next Doctor Strange movie, which is going to be awesome. Especially if it's a giant-sized Man-Thing.
Okay.
His first appearance was in a book titled Giant-Sized Man-Thing #1. And,
okay.
And so you can imagine that there's a lot of adolescent humor revolved around that title.
Yeah, I can definitely imagine that.
So, no, giant size just means that it has more pages in it than the average comic book, but it was a very unfortunate choice of words, a combination of words.
Thinking.
Or was thinking and laughing out loud on the inside.
Could be. Or any number of combinations, because I'm guessing more than one person went through the approval process on that one.
Yeah, very true. So this commercial references that nexus in a couple of lines where it says it works to anchor you back to your reality or the reality of your choice.
Yes.
And so this is definitely feeding into the multiverse concept. But I'm assuming that you, as someone who is not familiar with the Nexus of All Realities, didn't necessarily know that that was what it was talking about.
Nope. I mean, I know what a nexus is, but I figured that for it to be in this content and in this way, that there needed to be something Marvel related about that word.
Yes. Oh, definitely. Then, after the commercial, we come back to Agnes's house.
Yes.
Which, we don't really see the outside of it at this point, but a little Easter egg for those who enjoy that sort of thing. The house itself, the external view we do get of it later, that is the Bewitched house.
Are you serious?
Yes. They film on the Universal backlot for the exteriors, and so it is the same exact house that Samantha and Darren, and later Tabitha, lived in the show Bewitched.
Huh.
But right now we're inside the house, and we get Billy noting that Agnes is quiet.
It's quiet here. You're quiet, Agnes.
On the inside.
Yeah.
And so, like I said earlier, I think because Agnes is the only one that does not have another person inside.
Screaming to get out.
Yes. And so that's why Billy doesn't hear anything from her.
Yeah, I think that's totally valid. Now, she does say, Ralph says I sugarcoat things. Have we ever met Ralph?
No, she has referenced Ralph multiple times throughout the show, and Ralph has been a non-existent character. There are other examples, Maris in Frasier, Vera, Norm's wife in Cheers. Those are the two big ones that are coming to mind right away.
Right.
Of characters who are referenced, but never seen.
Which is totally a sitcom thing. But this particular show, it seems like if something is being referenced and not seen, then there may actually be something there. Or maybe there is nothing there. Maybe she has made up Ralph.
That's a complete possibility. There is no character named Ralph that Agatha is tied to in the comics.
Well, but Ralph could be a reference to someone else.
Right. Ralphisto.
Right. The devil saying you sugarcoat things. I love it. Oh, Agatha!
You're way too nice to everybody. Well, that is something the devil does.
Yeah.
So now we go back to Monica and Jimmy with the rover trying to drive into the barrier.
I had, in, like, almost the same time, two thoughts. The first one was, Monica can drive a space rover? Oh, of course she can. Those were the two thoughts, because we started off with her being grounded to terrestrial missions in episode 4. So of course she can drive a space rover.
Yeah, we know Monica has been in space from episode 4, so yes, it makes complete sense that she would have that knowledge on how to drive one of those machines. Mm-hmm. But when she first hit the barrier and it started angling up,
mm-hmm.
I knew it wasn't going to actually happen, but I had this flash in my mind of the Batmobile from Batman Forever driving straight up the building.
I had a similar thought.
I was like, is this thing gonna drive up the barrier?
I thought I thought the wheels were gonna catch on the barrier and then it was gonna flip itself upside down. But
Okay. Yeah, similar sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
But it goes deep enough into the barrier that it starts getting rewritten. And so Monica runs out, or escapes out, but then decides she don't need no stinking rover. And as she pushes through the barrier, the dialogue we hear, at least starting out, is the same dialogue we hear when Monica wakes up from the snap.
Interesting.
We get her saying, "You'll stay with Grandma and Grandpa. No, I can do this." And then the first new bit of dialogue we get is Nick Fury saying, "Only when you can glow like your Aunt Carol."
Mm-hmm.
And then we get some dialogue that's actually from this show. Wu talking about Maria and a couple of other things along those lines. And then when she gets told that she was the toughest, when Maria was being handed out kids, she got the toughest one in lot. And that's when Monica just pushes through.
Reformulates herself into a single entity.
Yeah, and I was chatting with someone else, the same guy I chatted with on one of the previous episodes, and he noted that there were 2 versions of Monica in front of her and one behind her, and the 2 in front of her were 2 of the TV characters that she played.
Okay.
And then his first thought was that it was past, present, future. But I looked at it, and then I went back to look at episode 4, and the one behind her is wearing the same outfit that she wore again when she woke up from the snap. And so I think my feeling is that it's not past, present, future. It's less real, more real. And so when she wakes up from the snap and has to deal with her mother's death, that is where her sense of self is grounded. And so as you get closer to the barrier to the other side, which is reality, that's the more real you are. And so because that's who she thinks of herself as being, she lives in that moment so much of her time now that is the version of her that is still trying to cling to reality, and so is farther back.
I can see that. That makes sense.
It would be interesting to see other characters try to break through that reality and see what their different versions were, to see how that does hold true or if it's something else.
It would be, but no one else is getting this origin story.
No, that is true. That is very, very true. And yeah, speaking of origin stories, when she finally does push through, we get the blue glowing eyes, and when she looks around, she sees electromagnetic radiation. She sees the magnetic fields around the power lines. Mm-hmm. And the outfit that she is wearing underneath her spacesuit, it's the same color scheme and has some of the same sort of patterning as her classic Captain Marvel Spectrum Photon costume.
All right, cool.
So we have now definitely gotten our superhero origin story for Monica.
Absolutely. And we'll see her starting to flex just a little bit later.
Yes.
I will say that I did not envision that barrier being as thick as it appeared to be. She was struggling through that hex barrier, and I know that some of that could be the internal struggle and it's metaphorical, but she was taking step after step after step, and it was way thicker than I thought it was.
Well, we didn't really get to see much of Vision coming through the other direction, but I think since Vision came through, when the barrier expanded, it also probably got thicker.
Probably. Got to protect from that happening again.
Yeah, and also, I think that when the barrier went red, I think that's also when things weren't allowed in at all, because
the drones used to get through.
The drones used to get through and get translated. Agent Franklin, still no sign of Agent Franklin.
Telling you, I think he's Mephisto. Okay, I don't, but it would be funny. If they got that same actor to play Mephisto at the end of this series, I would laugh and laugh and laugh.
Well, I went to find his IMDb credits.
Okay.
He is primarily a stunt coordinator.
Interesting.
So I think he may not show up ever again, or at least not have any speaking lines, because he does not have a lot of acting credits. So I don't think he's actually going to end up being important at all. But it's still one of those weird little dangling threads that you're like, why have we not seen what happened? So, yeah, Agent Franklin got through with no problem, just got translated. Drones got through with no problem, just got translated. But now things are actively being resisted. So I think that happened when Wanda came out with the drone and turned the barrier red.
Yeah. That half truck that came back was kind of cool.
Yeah, I couldn't tell if it was a truck or a van or what exactly it was supposed to be, but the fact that it was half and half was
reminiscent of the jump rope.
Yeah, same sort of effect of it got part way through and that part got translated, but the rest stayed as is. Mm-hmm. And was a very dangerous projectile as it was...
Oh my god.
...spit back out. So after Monica's superhero origin, now we cut back to the funnel cake truck.
Yes.
Where we get a sum up of what happened in Infinity War and Endgame. Mm-hmm. Thanks to a mostly off-camera discussion between Darcy and Vision. Mm-hmm. And then we get the obstacles to Vision trying to get home.
Yeah.
Which I thought were hilarious. Mm-hmm. Yeah, this episode, when it's in the sitcom world, is still playing things very much for laughs.
Yes. And it's so not Wanda doing this, but...
No, definitely not. This is, now that we know for sure, this is definitely Agatha trying to keep Wanda and Vision from getting on the same page.
Yeah, but how much of it is Vision is a threat, how much of it is if Vision isn't here, then his absence is a distraction and we want to keep Wanda distracted. How much of it is... there's all of these possibilities, and is it just that Wanda is stronger when Vision is there?
Yeah, it's hard to say exactly why she's trying to keep them apart, but she's definitely trying to keep them apart.
Absolutely.
And here's where we get the line that I loved, where he asks, "What am I now?" And Darcy says, "I don't know, but I do know that the love you two have is real."
Yeah.
And that is the heart of this show. The relationship between Wanda and Vision, their chemistry is so good. They are such a perfect couple that it's true. They belong together.
Yeah, when that relationship was revealed in the movies, it took me by surprise. Because obviously I was not familiar with all of this backstory and all of the stuff in the comics.
Right.
But it works.
It works really well. And again, a lot of that has to do with the actors playing the part.
Absolutely.
Paul Bettany and Elizabeth Olson work really well together and have such a nice, easy chemistry together in all their various iterations that we've seen. They always fit. And now Vision doesn't make it home yet, but Monica makes it back to the Vision residence.
Yeah, she's quite the runner.
Well, yeah, she's military who has been trained to be an astronaut. You have to have a bit of stamina to be able to do that sort of thing.
Right.
So, not too surprising there. But she shows up and she tries her best to explain what's actually happening.
Well, what's actually happening from one perspective? There's a few things actually happening.
Well, yes. She's trying to explain Hayward's role in all of this. And Wanda just refuses at this point. And the town basically watching.
Yeah.
But not doing anything is another one of those moments of they all know somewhere inside of what's going on, but nobody's going to stand up and do anything about it.
Well, what if the wrong person wins? That's not a horse you want to back if it's the wrong direction.
Right. And we get another flare-up of Monica's powers at this point.
Mm-hmm.
When Wanda throws her to the ground and...
And she just takes it.
Yeah, she does a superhero landing.
Yep.
And Wanda and Monica's conversation here has a few moments in it that I want to touch on.
Okay.
Don't let him make you the villain. And her saying, maybe I already am.
Yeah. Well, again, looking back on the first 6 episodes and looking at this world as being something that was kind of forced upon her, Agatha has been manipulating Wanda this entire time and manipulating her mind this entire time so that A, she would go more insane, and B, so that she would see herself as the villain and be okay with Hayward doing what he's going to do. I mean, that in a lot of ways, this world is not just a let's get the kids, let's get Mephisto into this world, but it's also let's cover our tracks.
Yeah, let's put the blame on it with Wanda.
Mm-hmm.
Let's do this horrible, evil thing and point the blame at someone else.
Yep. Multifaceted, multi-layered, but the maybe I am the villain, that's all
from Agatha's
implants.
Yeah, manipulations. Speaking of which, Monica starts talking about her loss and accepting it, and it looks like she's starting to break through. It looks like Wanda might actually listen.
Can't have that.
And so Agnes interrupts.
Mm-hmm.
And takes her away and takes her back to her house. And then the town kind of goes back to normal and everyone's just like, do, nothing to see here. I'm making my deliveries. I like that Dennis the mailman is now Dennis the Presto delivery guy.
Yes.
And we get one final interview segment with Vision this time.
Mm-hmm.
And my absolute favorite breaking the fourth wall moment is in this interview.
when he hits the boom.
Well, not just hits the boom, but realizes, wait, why am I sitting here talking to you being interviewed when I need to get home?
Yes.
And so stands up, takes the mic off of his uniform, and then, yes, hits the boom, and the cape kind of catches on the chair as he's walking away. Yes, all of that was just hilarious to me. I had to go back and watch it again a couple of times. And then I really love how it immediately cuts to him in the truck, phasing out and flying away.
Right.
Because it shows that these interview segments are happening in real time.
Right.
So it shows that these interview segments are happening in real time, and so that when it cuts from him in the truck to the interview and then back to in the truck, that is happening at the same time.
Right.
It is not he is being interviewed later. So that is hilarious to me, because that's one of the weird things about these modern shows that do these interview segments is, when are they being interviewed?
Yeah, there's always that question, and my understanding, because again, I haven't watched a whole lot of these, but my understanding is that it's fluid. It
Right.
could be happening simultaneous. It could be that they just, that was interesting, come here. Or it could be the end of the day. It's never specified, and that's intentional.
Oh, of course. It's just one of those weird things about these kinds of shows.
Right.
That are influenced by reality TV and all of that.
Which of course is the most real thing ever.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, reality TV is exactly what happens in real life.
Well, at least it's what happens in the show The Real Life.
Yes, it's what happens when people stop being polite and start being real. But not the show we're talking about.
No, we are talking about something very different.
Yes.
We're talking about Yo Gabba Gabba.
Yes.
Which does show up on the screen in here.
Yeah. When Wanda comes back, we see the little sandwiches on the table, half eaten. We see Yo Gabba Gabba on the TV. And it starts Wanda thinking, hey, kids.
Wait a minute.
And now there was Senor Scratchy in the cage. And what was on the curtain? Was it a beetle? Was it a cockroach? Was it
I thought it was just a
moth?
fly.
It was bigger than a fly. It is definitely an unusual creature to be inside of a home.
Yeah, and not just that, but it's one of those things that we haven't seen anything like that in this world. You know, the Westview doesn't have
Pests.
rain, doesn't have pests.
Yeah.
Things are breaking down.
Well, I don't think of this one as a breaking down. I think of this one more sinister than that.
Sure.
Because...
well, everything about the interior of this house is dark. Wanda's house is bright and airy and spacious, and this is dark and cramped and closed in and oppressive.
yes.
And so, yeah, absolutely, this is the house that would have these weird insect things.
Yeah, and those kinds of creatures are associated usually with demonic forces. If it is just a very large fly, there's Lord of the Flies, Beelzebub. Sure. And beetles are usually kind of associated with, like, Egyptian dead and all that sort of thing. So, yeah, there's usually some sort of dark association with insects and the powers behind them.
Yeah.
And so now Wanda finally asks about the twins, and Agnes says, they're probably just playing in the basement. Always a good sign.
Oh, yes. Yeah,
a
decision was made there.
You always want to send 10-year-old kids down into the basement to play.
Sure. That's probably just Ralph's man cave.
Yeah, well, We find out.
Probably
because
is.
it might be, depending on if Ralph is Ralphisto. Because Wanda goes down into the basement and finds a dungeon castle-looking path into a domed room with sigils around all of the arches.
Mm-hmm. With weird plants, vines wrapped around each other and themselves in twisted ways, and the whole thing is effectively creepy.
Yeah, and I didn't have time to go back and try to find examples, but those sigils to me look similar to what I think of as some of the sigils in Doctor Strange.
Okay.
Like specifically the doorways to various sanctorums.
Right.
So there may be some sort of travel aspect there, or it may be just similar magical sigils. Because Agatha, her powers are based in magic, just like Doctor Strange.
Right.
And we get a book with glowing energy around it in this dungeon. And Marvel Comics has a book that is very important, and it is called The Darkhold. It's shown up in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. in the same season that had the Ghost Rider in it.
Mm-hmm.
This one does not look the same as the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. one, but I think that Marvel Television has been abandoned and is no longer considered canon to the MCU for the most part.
Yeah, I think you're right.
And so they could use a different prop and still have it be the Darkhold. And the Darkhold is basically the Necronomicon. It is tied to the Old Ones and their powers. So that is my assumption as to what that book is.
I think that's a reasonable assumption. I just want to see Agatha going Klaatu Verata.
And you'll notice that the book is glowing with red energy.
I did notice that.
Rather than purple energy. So my theory is that they have been draining from Wanda this whole time. Her energy. Because her powers are shown to have the red color to them. Right. Whereas Agatha's powers we see have a purple aura. And so the fact that this book has red tendrils of energy around it seems to me that it is being powered, or it is related to Wanda's energies. And so it is sucking that away from her to power up whatever it is Agatha wants to do.
Right. And it's also differentiated from, for example, Billy's power, which is shown to be in hues of blue.
Ooh, nice catch. Yes. We only get that once in the Halloween episode, but yes, that is a definite blue tinge to his power when he stops Tommy in his path.
Mm-hmm. And the other time that we have seen specific colors associated with specific powers is with the various stones. The the Reality Stone being the red, the Tesseract being blue. Well, actually, the Tesseract was the Mind Stone. Wasn't that yellow?
No, the Scepter is the Mind Stone. The Scepter is the Mind Stone. The
Tesseract was space?
Space, yes.
Okay, so that one was blues.
Blue.
Did we have a purple?
Yes, the Power Stone. From Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 1.
Right. So, I mean, it's also possible that these powers that we're seeing are somehow associated with those.
That's true. And some of those make sense. You know, we've talked about the fact that Wanda's powers seem to be reality-based. And the Reality Stone was red. And Agatha seems to be trying to collect power.
Right.
And her powers are purple, like the Power Stone. So, yeah, it could all be related like that. In Infinity War, I don't remember if it was Infinity War or Endgame, but in one of those, we basically get told that these stones not only formed with the universe, but help form the universe.
Right.
And so the fact that they got destroyed, it could be that there are new objects out there, or possibly people who now
Have
represent,
access.
yes, who represent those same aspects of the universe.
It could be. What they said in Endgame was that the stones couldn't really be destroyed. They were just atomized and spread. So they were dispersed amongst the galaxy, which I would think would give lots of people access if they had the ability to tap into it.
Right. It's possible. Now, let's get down to the big reveal.
It was Agatha all along.
Such a great song.
Yeah.
And you noted in our pre-conversation that the actual title is...
It was blank all along. If you watch the ending credits, past the special effects ending credits, but the ones that are actually just text, and find that one slide that has the song in it, there's a bunch of studio singers from LA who I believe I know some of from the a cappella world, strangely enough, but the song title itself was It Was ______ all along. That's the title of the song.
Which is great because when you publish a song like that, you have to copyright it.
Mm-hmm.
And so if they had copyrighted that song before the show was released, then somebody could have easily found it and spoiled for everybody that Agatha was the villain behind this show.
Right.
So that's a very nice way of them avoiding spoilers.
Mm-hmm.
And I've mentioned her a little bit and her comic book history, but let's get a little deeper now that we have had this
confirmation.
Yes, now that it's been confirmed who she is. Because mostly Agatha in the comics has been on the good side of things.
I got that impression from what you've said so far. It kind of surprised me when we were talking throughout this series that this character that I thought was a quote-unquote good guy would potentially be the one in charge of all of this.
Right. So the first time we meet Agatha Harkness is in Fantastic Four 94, when they hire her to be Franklin Richards' nanny / governess.
Okay.
And we suspect something is unusual about her very quickly, but she doesn't actually reveal her magical abilities to the Fantastic Four until issue 110.
That's some time.
She just had an excellent reputation as a nanny, and so they convinced her to come out of retirement to help take care of Franklin.
She can put those kids to bed like magic.
Agatha is portrayed as much older, not just in actual age, but in appearance, than Catherine Hahn is. When we see Agatha from her very first appearance, she looks more like Aunt May in the comics than like Catherine Hahn. And she's got the gray hair up in a bun sort of thing. Well, more a bouffant than a bun. So she has that really tall gray hair all held back behind her and wears a brooch on her neck, similar to the brooch that we see Agnes wearing through much of the show.
Mm-hmm.
And over the years, we have learned some of her history. She is old enough that she remembers Atlantis sinking, and eventually took up residence in Salem, and was present for the Salem witch trials.
Okay.
But she was one of the people turning in some of the witches, believing basically only the strong survive. That if they're obvious enough to be caught, that they shouldn't be in the coven.
Okay, but that's still kind of a extreme way to go about weeding them out.
Yeah. So most of the time, she has been on the side of good, but she is willing to take very extreme measures to do what she thinks needs to be done.
Chaotic good.
That would be a very accurate D&D alignment description of her, yes. And so she, after the Salem witch trials, she and the remaining members of her coven left and formed their own town in what eventually became the state of Colorado. So she went way west very early and founded the town of New Salem, which was much more friendly to witches and mystical beings and such. And she had a son named Nicholas Scratch.
Wait. So you're saying that Senor Scratchy...
It's possible. She also, in the comics, has a familiar name that is a black cat named Ebony. So it could be a little bit of combining of aspects of her comic book character there. But her son has kids of his own who become the Salem's Seven, who take over New Salem and end up burning Agatha at the stake because they don't agree with her way of doing things. And then Agatha comes back with no explanation given.
Like you do in comics.
And this is when she meets up with Wanda and reveals the fact that the children, that Tommy and Billy, are actually fragments of Mephisto's soul. And Agatha is the one who, after the battle is over and the kids have been reabsorbed into Mephisto, she says, well, Wanda can't deal with this, so I'm wiping her memory. And so Wanda doesn't remember having kids at all because of Agatha.
So there is definitely precedent for Agatha having mind powers.
Yes. Well, she has magic powers, which means she can do pretty much anything as long as she knows the spell for it. And then, because Wanda gets her memory wiped, but the rest of the Avengers who are there don't.
Okay.
And so, at one point, Wasp makes a comment in a conversation with Wanda about her sons. And Wanda starts to remember her kids, and that's when she has her breakdown, which leads into the House of M that we've talked about.
Right.
But before she goes full House of M, one of the things she does is she tracks down Agatha and kills her for removing her memory.
So these two are antagonistic.
They are, except that Agatha was also the one who helped train Wanda in using her chaos magic, who trained her to become an actual witch rather than just a mutant or mutant-like person with semi-mystical powers.
Right.
She also ended up helping when Wonder Man died and his soul was connected to Wanda. There was a story in Avengers where when Wanda needed him, she could basically kind of bring Wonder Man out, and he was a being of energy. And so Agatha is also the one that helped separate the two so that Wonder Man could live again and be his own separate being. So since the Scarlet Witch and Vision miniseries, they have been very closely associated with one another, even though she started as a Fantastic Four character. But how their relationship has been portrayed has gone from mentor-teacher to antagonistic and back again, because Wanda used her magical abilities with the help of her actual birth mother's soul, resurrected Agatha. The Scarlet Witch had her own solo miniseries fairly recently, actually, just in the last couple of years, where she was using her witch abilities, using her full magical abilities to help people out. And she basically found her birth mother's soul and was able to communicate with her, but they needed to bring back Agatha because of how important she is to the world. And so Agatha was resurrected once again. And currently, the last time we've seen Agatha, she has been helping the Daughters of Liberty, which is a group that is entirely made of women that are allies of Captain America. So includes Peggy and Sharon Carter and Shuri, Black Panther's sister.
Mm-hmm.
And so that is the last time we have seen her is recently in the pages of Captain America. And that is basically the backstory of Agatha. So you can see what I was saying, where she has mostly been on the good side of things, but she's willing to take actions that most heroes would not take. So if she is actually a villain in this show, as they seem to be pointing towards at the very end here, that is a new take on her compared to what we've seen in the comics.
Right. Well, one thing that they have shown in this series so far is that characters are more than they appear to be.
Yes.
And this could be a Severus Snape kind of thing, where, yes, they are doing... He's Slytherin, it's very clear. He's antagonist to our heroes, but he is on the side of good.
Right. Or it could be that she's being controlled in some way by... Again, I'm still sticking to my Mephisto theory, in that he is going to be the big bad in the very end. Or some sort, I mean, again, because we now see what could be the Darkhold. So it could be that it's not Mephisto, but some other old god sort of thing. But Agatha could be under that control.
Right.
She could have been looking at some spellbook to try to get more power and released something that possessed her.
When you look into the void also looks into you.
Yes, that is true. And so once we get the Agatha reveal, and we then get Agatha's theme song, which we pointed out some of the
moments
there, but very obviously a Munsters homage. And I really loved how the theme song went through all the time periods. How the scenes that we see during it show all of the background of what she was doing.
Mm-hmm. But again, when she does her reveal, you see her eyes kind of glow purple, and then Wanda has, in purple special effects, the kinds of things that she was doing in Age of Ultron to other people.
Yes.
Of impacting their minds.
Yes, yeah, the purple glow goes from Agatha's eyes to Wanda's temples,
mm-hmm.
which is always a signification of mind control or putting in of thoughts, some sort of mental intrusion.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm betting that the theme song is basically what Wanda is seeing in her head.
Right. And again, this is where all of the theme songs, all of the commercials, Wanda is the audience.
Right. And we end with the opening theme song with Agatha crossing the line. She killed the dog.
Right.
She killed Sparky, which, if you kill a dog, you're evil. There's no going back from that, unless she is controlled somehow.
Right.
And then it cuts straight to the credits, and we get our first...
MCU button!
Yes, our first mid-credits scene. So if anybody missed it, be sure to go back and watch all the way through the animated credits.
Yeah, it's in between the animated credits and the text credits.
Yes.
Pause us now.
Yes, if you have not watched that yet, pause now, go watch that, come back.
Welcome back.
Yes. And we see that Monica has followed the pair back to Agatha's house.
Mm-hmm.
She looks in the windows, goes around, finds the cellar doors, opens them up, and sees the purple energy. I have to wonder if that is Monica's powers seeing that, because her eyes do glow blue as she pulls the door open, or if that is visible to anyone.
I think that would be visible to anyone at this point, but it's entirely possible your interpretation's dead on.
But either way, before she gets any chance to investigate, Pietro finally shows back up.
Yeah, that was a little odd.
And says, Snooper's gonna snoop. And then cut to the text credits.
Yeah.
So we get a nice cliffhanger for our next episode. Now, we saw in the Agatha All Along credits the purple energy surrounding Pietro, or at least at his back, when he showed up at Wanda and Vision's door.
Mm-hmm.
And so, obviously, Agatha is somehow responsible for Pietro's being here.
Right.
That explains how he knew in the previous episode everything that he did. But the question is, still, who is he? Is he a version of Pietro? Is he completely made up by Agatha, or was he pulled in from some alternate universe?
Right, because if that book is a dimension-hopping thing...
If it is the nexus of all realities.
Sure. But yeah, if that's the case, then Agatha could very easily, well, maybe not easily, but could have grabbed a Pietro and done her mind heebie-jeebies and
put in the MCU's memories.
Right. Or at least her awareness of the MCU memories.
Right.
And because, as you pointed out, his memories and Wanda's memories don't always line up exactly right.
That's true. That's true. So, yeah, she could have put in what she knew of the MCU's Pietro.
Right. And then just extrapolate from there.
Yeah.
Improvise, dude!
And so, now that we know that Agatha is behind this, do you think that the dead Vision and dead Pietro were actually Agatha doing that, or do you still think it was Wanda's lack of focus?
Good question. I suspect the former at this point. I think that was Agatha trying to push Wanda over the edge.
Yes, I think so as well. We could basically go back and rewatch the entire first 6 episodes with this new eye. Even though I had suspected a lot of this, but knowing it for sure and seeing, how they've portrayed this and what her powers are, what Agatha can do in this iteration, it just completely opens the show back up to being rewatched and reinterpreted.
Which we knew was going to be a probability.
Yes. Yeah, we had talked about that from the beginning, that things would likely change in a way that would make a rewatch not just desirable, but almost necessary too.
It's almost worth you and I having a 10th or 11th episode or whatever it ends up being of, okay, we have now rewatched the entire series with all of the information that came from the end of it. Let's chat. Maybe not scene by scene like we've been doing here,
but picking out some of the important moments and...
Yeah, here's how we thought it was initially, but here's what actually was going on, and that's kind of neat.
Yes. At that point, I had to get going, so that wraps up this week's deep dive. We'll continue our conversation by talking about the penultimate episode of WandaVision next week, but we'd love to hear from you as well. We'll be getting back to listener questions not too long from now, so if you have any of those, be sure to email them. The address is welcome2geektown, all spelled out, @gmail.com. Or go to the website, welcome2, the number 2 in this case, geektown.com, and click the Submit a Question link if you prefer to remain anonymous. Other contact options include facebook.com/welcome-to-geektown or Twitter @geektownpodcast. Also, if you'd like to support the show directly, come join the Patreon at patreon.com/welcome-to-geektown for just $1 per month to get access to full scripts of the shows, outtakes, and a monthly shoutout. You can also help the show grow by subscribing and giving a 5-star review over on Apple Podcasts to join the Geektown City Council, which helps other people find the show so we can all tell them,
Welcome to Geektown. Population? Us.
Welcome to Geektown is written, narrated, edited, and produced by me, Kurt Onstead. Theme music is by Aaron Lovitz, logo art by Archie Santana. All other sound clips are the copyrighted material of their respective owners, and no infringement is intended, falling under fair use.